Hey, we're joined by Vikram Baliga, Lubbock County Horticultural Extension Agent. Man, this guy's everywhere. His family's got this peach orchard. He's working on his PhD with the turf doctor, Joey Young. And so I got a couple of questions for you.
Yeah.
Game on for the farmers market.
They'll
this
be
weekend.
there. They'll be there. In fact, I just looked it up, and they are good to go for the 4th.
Even though it's 4th of July, we're still going to have fresh fruits and vegetables.
It's true. Celebrate freedom with fruit. I don't know. Something.
Hey, but
Freedom fruit.
this is interesting. Okay, Vic walks in with this bag of fresh peaches that he picked off his trees, and if you see what I see when you're in this, maybe if you're in the store or with fresh fruit and things like that, if you ever see brown spots on things, a lot of people just sit there and they go, "Ew."
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because there's a perception we have when we go to the grocery store that all the fruits, and I get it, there's nothing wrong with that, but all the fruits are perfect, they look good, and because that's what sells, that's what you want to sell. But on a fairly, not non-managed, we don't spray chemicals on these. We put we do fertilize, but there's no insecticide sprayed, and because of that, you get a little bit of skin damage on the fruit sometimes. And it's windy here. I don't know if we've noticed, but it's windy.
Well, yeah, we've had some 70-mile-an-hour winds.
It's just a little bit, just a little windy. Well, the fruits get knocked around into other fruit, into branches, into different things, and so they get a little bit of pitting on the skin, or they'll get hail damage.
And then they turn, and the spots kind of turn brown.
Yeah, and
but
so
it's just skin. It's just on the skin.
It's just on the skin, and so a lot of folks, I think, in their backyards are going to see that on their trees this year.
Okay.
Because we've had wind, we've had hail, not a lot, but a little bit of hail. It's been wet, so there's bugs everywhere, and so you'll get a little bit of these cosmetic issues on your fruit sometimes.
But in these brown spots, like you're saying, they're very superficial. They're not like a bruise, like a big old bruise that you would expect.
Right, and it's not like, and
you can eat it.
You could eat it. You could eat the spots themselves, but really they just go just below the layer of the skin of the fruit. So if you took a knife and kind of pared that off, you can't tell a difference on the inside. And there's something about just a vine ripened or a tree ripened fruit or vegetable that you can't feel like get.
Now let me ask you something. Okay, now I think I've heard separate this fact from fiction. I heard somewhere that it's better like if you're getting like a peach or a cantaloupe or a watermelon, that when there are imperfections in the surface of the fruit is going to be sweeter because it tries to heal itself and it has more sugars? Is that true or false?
That's not something I've necessarily heard. I guess it makes sense because as a response to damage, they'll start moving more resources there. So, and resources in a tree are carbohydrates or sugars. And so, it's possible. A lot of the sugar content depends on, one, how much rainfall we get, which this year was a good year, and also how hot it is. That's why, you talk about grapes. There's a lot of grape production in the state of Texas. A lot in the hill country, but there's a lot in this area, too.
A lot in Terry County.
A lot in Terry County. Tons in Terry County.
Like 90% or 80% of what's grown in Texas is in Terry County.
Well,
it's a huge amount.
At least in West Texas, it's mostly out of that area. Grapes do great here. They're a great crop, and that's people are but it's dry, and grapes like that. That the hot, dry summers actually build up a lot of sugars in the grape, and so they're great for winemaking. They're our grapes in this region are actually top notch. We don't have a lot of disease problems, and so it's a good place to do some fruits and vegetables.
Okay, now
sure.
I got to ask you. I love cucumbers.
Right.
Okay, but last year, during season, the cucumbers were so bitter.
Right.
And what makes a cucumber bitter? It's just like I know this is random, but I'm just kind of curious because what are the conditions that make it bitter?
Some of it has to do with variety. There are some varieties that are naturally more bitter than others.
There's more than one.
Yeah,
I knew there was green ones and Armenian ones, but
there's lots of varieties of cucumbers, really, and some of them are grown, whatever word I'm looking for. It's apparently early.
Yeah.
Are grown for to be slicers, so table cucumbers. Some are grown for pickling, and some of those sometimes tend to be a little bit more bitter, the picklers, because they're going to add stuff to them anyway. Some of it is the age of the fruit. The younger you harvest them, a lot of times you don't want it to be this big and then pick it off, but you also don't want it to get 3 feet long and turn into shoe leather before you harvest it, because it does get bitter the longer it kind of sits on there sometimes, as some of those sugars break down. And
I was just kind of curious because it was one of those situations where it's like every week I'd go to the store and get one or two. I'd get to the table and be like, ugh.
And
Go ahead.
I don't know. I was just gonna say, and sometimes it's for whatever reason they pull it. Soil determines the flavor of fruit. A lot of times depends what they're grown in. It's interesting. It's a complex.
Maybe it was grown a little bit too close to the pasture.
You never know. It's a complex thing. It's pretty interesting.
Huh. Go figure.
So, what are the best fruit trees for where we are?
That's a good question. Probably, I would say the most reliable crop is probably apples, because a lot of times it'll get you past that. We struggle with a late freeze. The problem with the climate here is not that it's cold. I mean, it is cold, but it's that it's cold and then it warms up, and then it's cold again and then it warms up, and so
up and down. Yeah,
our winters do this. They go up and down a lot, and so a lot of times some of your fruit varieties will start to push blossoms. They'll start to, set fruit in early March, because we get a warm snap and it'll be 80 degrees for
and then it
freezes.
Set back. Yeah.
Then it freezes and it'll freeze the blossoms off. But a lot of times, a lot of varieties of apple will kind of get you past that late freeze. They bloom late enough and they can take the cold. Peaches do well. You just want to look for varieties that have a high chilling requirement. So in order to fruit and to set fruit, trees need a certain number of hours of cold weather.
Really?
Mm-hmm. And I think the chilling temperature is between like 30 and 45 degrees, somewhere in there. And so a lot of fruit trees are kind of categorized by chilling hours. So down in South Texas, you'd want a very low chilling hour variety of tree, because
they're just not going to get that.
Because they're not going to get it.
Okay, so is this where like genetic engineering comes into play?
Not really. A lot of that's just natural, like the selection of the plants, or where they grew naturally.
Right. Okay.
So like a northern variety,
product of their environment.
Exactly.
So to speak.
Exactly.
So when I was growing up in Kentucky, my grandfather had and my grandmother and grandfather had
Here
all
it comes.
kind of. No, it's not. It's not the 3-holer outhouse. My great grandfather did have that, but this is about fruit. They had tons of fruit trees, and my grandfather, though, this was always curious to me. He would not pick the fruit off the tree. He would let it fall to the ground before he would harvest anything.
So that's going to be a completely ripe fruit.
Yeah, it's always seemed a little strange to me.
And you can do it that way. Some people will tarp under their trees and pick them up after that. The problem is that your shelf life, once it drops off the trees, is quickly deteriorating.
Right.
So if you pick it just a hair green and let it ripen off the tree, then it'll sit a little bit longer.
Gotcha.
Okay, so this is a question. All right, you get peaches, and when you're buying stuff in the grocery store, or whether you get stuff at the farm, wherever you get them, if the peach is or fruit is super firm, a lot of people put them in a paper bag and say, "Oh, you got to put it in a paper bag. Got to be a paper bag." I mean, what's the deal
true?
on it?
Does it ripen better in a paper bag?
It will. You can ripen it in a plastic bag, but sometimes it ripens too quickly. So fruit, as it matures,
the greenhouse effect.
That's exactly what it is, actually. They release something called ethylene gas as they ripen, and it causes other fruits to ripen.
That's why they put them in those green bags, huh?
So some bags are designed to absorb ethylene, and so they won't ripen as quickly, so you can keep them longer. If you put them in a plastic or a paper bag, they start to build up more ethylene, and it'll ripen the fruits around them.
I got it.
Bananas ripen very quickly, and they release a lot of ethylene.
So keep your other fruit away from your bananas
Exactly.
to keep it from going bad.
Yeah.
Golly.
And
You'd think I would have observed this.
And also, if you've got like a cooler with flowers in it that you don't want the petals to drop, don't store your fruit around it, because it also causes petal drop in flowers.
All right, now we gotta hit a break here in just a
Bananas
second.
do?
We're almost out of time.
Fruit in general.
Wow.
But got a text from buddy Steve Book. Are there any cherry trees that are good for this area?
I honestly don't know a lot about cherry trees. I know that they tend to flower pretty early, and so you can get that late freeze damage. But I will look into it, and I will let you know, and you can get back to Steve.
Get back to you, Steve. Appreciate it. Vikram Baliga, Lubbock County Horticulture Extension Agent. Appreciate your business. Have a good 4th.
Thanks for having me on.